Hey everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Bastock and Bachelor Bullshit Busters. I'm Simon Batchelor,
I'm Adam Bastock.
and today we are going to be talking about website loading speeds. So this topic is often thought of as a very technical and very boring subject. And in some ways it is both of those things. However, what we want to do today is explain to you a little bit why everybody keeps banging on about how fast your website loads, because there are some rather important factors that you need to consider, and there's some important things that do mean that your website does need to load fast. However, just like with a lot of things online, there's also a whole load of weird sort of myths and ideas surrounding fear, why you need it to happen. So Adam, do you want to give us a quick breakdown of I guess the most important reason to you that your website is fast to load?
Yeah, I think the main message I always try and convey with this, because a lot of people are concerned around SEO. They've read somewhere that, for good SEO, page speed is a ranking factor, and therefore you need to have a quick website to rank in SEO. So that is, as a statement, true, but it is not as true as it may seem. You can still have a slow website and rank. The idea being that what Google is trying to encourage people to do is have websites that are nice to use and provide a good user experience, so that if you are on a hill in Wales with a 3G connection and you're trying to access the campsite's website, that campsite is not automatically loading in 45 megabyte pictures of the scenery and loads of video content. It might instead have compressed those down to be quite small, or not show them on mobile, and on mobile it will be a more seamless and kind of quicker loading experience. That does not necessarily mean that website has to be the speed of a Formula One car and has to load with a dedicated AWS server, and it's pulling in all these different things. It's about that kind of balance between making sure the user is having a good experience and that your website is not delivering unnecessarily large files, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of the messaging around some of the tools out there, and particularly Google, I remember a couple of years ago when they made the change to their algorithm where they were saying we're going to start counting mobile speed as a ranking factor.
Yeah.
And they were sending out emails that were absolutely terrifying customers, sort of essentially implying like if you don't get this loading in under a second, it's going to disappear off the internet and things like that.
Exactly.
And I think they were kind of a bit of a, they obviously wanted people to take it seriously, but I think they might have taken it a bit far. And I think maybe that is one of the reasons why there's this sort of, ridiculous fear around it. But I think what you touched on there is ultimately that the user is the first person that should benefit from this.
Yeah.
So the adage is the kind of wisdom is that at the moment that a user will spend about 3 seconds on a website making a decision before they go. So if your website doesn't load within 3 seconds, then you've made the decision for them. They will go somewhere else. It's as simple as that. There is no decision to make. So I think what Google is trying to do is it's trying to say, well, actually, if you can get the basic web page loaded in a second, at least you're then giving the user 2 seconds to decide whether it's right for them. So you're increasing the likelihood that users are going to stay on the site, as opposed to just go off to your competitors. And I think obviously because Google knows everything about every website, so it's able to see how long people spend on websites before they come back. So they must have worked out, right, 3 seconds is the average time. Yeah. So I think, without going off into a tangent on having a good hook at the top of the website, which is obviously what you need, because if you've only got 2 seconds after it's loaded to win someone over, you need to have that key thing at the top of the website. What I would also say is you need to give some consideration to the first thing that the user sees. So a lot of people used to put a video at the top of their websites, but of course the problem with that is that takes even longer to load. So again, you're just working against yourself all the time. So I think having that kind of conscious consideration about what is the first thing the user sees and does it help them or is it slowing them down, that's a big factor for me anyway.
I think a pet peeve of mine, as a good example of this, will be like recipe websites where you're googling for a butternut squash curry or something like that, load onto the web page, and there's 4, cookie acceptance and email sign up pop-ups that load. Then you've got to try and scroll through 4,000 words of text to try and find the actual recipe that you've been promised. Somehow those kind of pages still rank, and I think that's a good example of where perhaps things have got kind of diluted, where there's so many different types of messaging that are going on there. You're having to fight your way through to the actual content you want. And normally I just click back off of those instantly and go and find a
Same
BBC
here.
Good Food article, because I know that they don't have those pop-ups, and that I know that it's going to have the recipe on a tab that I can just access. So I think that's we're kind of moving more towards perhaps UX there, but that's also related to page speed and kind of, well, how long are people staying on that website? Are they actually finding what they want? Are you giving them the stuff that they want and making sure that that user experience is good? And that's, if you are ticking all those boxes, then you will rank better than people who are obfuscating the content on the site and kind of not letting you actually discover what you are looking for.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, sorry, that there are a few tools that you kind of mentioned to try and find the kind of the big errors with your website, in terms of if you have got massive images or massive video files that might be slowing it down. Wasn't sure if you wanted to cover that.
Yeah, so one of them is called GT Metrics, and GT Metrics is a tool where you put your URL in and then you click test, and it basically goes off and it simulates a user visiting your website. It does this on both desktop and mobile. It simulates both of those. And it comes back with a report, and at the top of the screen it just gives you a nice A, B, C, D, E scoring. There is an F, but I've never seen it. So essentially you want to be aiming for a C or above on your first try, I would say. If you've got a C or below, there's something majorly wrong with your website. It's probably because you've got a massive image at the top, or the way that your website's been coded means it has to load every single element on the page before it completes the loading. And that's a very old school website way of doing things. And so if you haven't touched your website in 5 years, you're going to be scoring maybe a C or a D, I'd imagine, without any sort of effort. Really, your site should be in the A. Anything less than an A is going to start to penalise you across many different factors, search being one of them. You're also going to be penalised in Google Ads if you're running those, because your page speed is ranked. So slow loading websites pay a penalty. So it's the same as your page relevance score in Google Ads. If you have an irrelevant or a shit, basically, landing page, Google's like, this landing page is awful, and you pay a penalty. And as we all know, those of us who run Google Ads, those penalties can get quite high and just make it completely uneconomical to run. Page speed is actually quite a big factor in that. So the other thing that really slows down websites is video. So putting videos, if you've got more than one video on a page, it's probably not going to rank very well. So you need to try and keep those to a minimum on pages that it's important. So one thing that I would also say with these tools is that people often only measure the homepage because it's the easiest URL to put in. But actually the other page that I think is crucial to measure is your contact page or your call to action page, because that page needs to be mobile friendly and it needs to load super fast, because that is literally the point where someone is reaching out to you to make a connection. And the number of websites I've been to with a homepage, the mobile effectiveness is absolutely bang on, and then the contact form just explodes on mobile. Is just an absolute nightmare. So there are other tests. There's one from Google, which is a Google page speed insights score thing.
Also, Google Lighthouse, I think it's going to rebrand it to recently as well.
It's got like 3 or 4 names.
Yeah, they've kind of confused them over the years, but that's the one. They all seem to do the same thing and produce the same sort of report.
Yes. The one thing I would say about the Google one is it is built for a handful, maybe I'd say 3,000 or 4,000 developers in the world. Everybody else, it's entirely useless. It gives you a numerical score at the top, which is either red, orange or green. Essentially anything beyond that is completely unintelligible to any human. It is genuinely, there's probably about 3,000 or 4,000 people on the planet who can understand that score. So the tool itself is completely useless. However, that is what Google used to rank your site and penalise you with Google Ads. So you need to make sure that the thing at the top goes green. That's all you need to know about that tool. Then go to GT Metrics and get a human-friendly report. From there. There are lots of other ones out there that promise to give you these scores. I'll be honest, some of them are good, some of them are bad. The one thing I've found, and this is after years of running these tools, is that GT Metrics is the best because it doesn't try and sell you anything. It's not a loss leader into another product. It's just a tool built by developers for developers. So I would say if you're thinking that you want to check out your site, it does give you some really good tips on what to do, and it's in fairly intelligible language. So it will say like, that video you've got on your page is too big, or this image is massive, and it tells you which image. And now it even says, here's a compressed version of the image, so you can just download it. It's brilliant.
That picks up on a good point I wanted to just reference earlier, because you said earlier, if you've got a large image at the top of your website, that's bad. What we mean by that is a large image that hasn't been optimized or kind of resized. So having like a large banner at the top of your website is absolutely fine. Just make sure that you're not serving it in the native format. So if I'm loading onto a homepage on my mobile, I don't necessarily want to see the full like 4,000 pixel wide DSLR file that you have for your iMac for the what they call retina based displays.
Yes.
You want to be able to, I mean, most kind of modern web browsers or web builders, so like Squarespace or Shopify and stuff, tend to kind of handle this a little bit for you, where they will resize the photo depending on what what's the word device they're displaying on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's right. Yeah,
Completely failed to turn over words there. But yeah, so you want to have like a smaller file that, rather than taking it out of the DSLR and putting it straight onto your website, you will want to resize it to an appropriate size that is more palatable and normal and digestible for a normal website. So,
and I have seen a real world example of that. I once did a speed test on a website for a customer who called up and said their website was slow, and they were loading a 37 meg raw JPEG as the header image.
that's exactly what you want to avoid. Instead, you want to be loading like a 37 kilobyte
absolutely.
image.
If you're running WordPress, you can use a plugin called Smush, and you just install it, and it just smushes all your images, just makes them small. It's that easy. There's no real reason why you can't do this yourself just with a plugin. It's really easy to do.
There's a great website that I think Google developed as well called, and I'm going to read it off my second screen here. So it's called squoosh.app, SQUOOSH.app. Really simple to use. There's basically no user experience on it. You just drag a photo in, and then you can resize it and export it as different things, including into WebP, which we won't go into, but like you could do basically loads of different technical file formats. So if you do need to resize images, that's great. And also there's like Tiny Panda, I think. Or
Yes,
like that.
yeah, Image Panda. That's a great site, because the actual site is called tinypng.com.
Yeah.
But because it's got the panda on it that gets excited when it compresses images, everyone just types Image Panda and it's the top result. It's very, very clever.
Great example of branding.
There is also a WordPress plugin from tinypng.
Yeah.
However, that'll only do like 10 images a day or something, because they want you to buy the paid one. Whereas Smoosh will just smush everything for free.
And Squoosh will do it manually for you, one at a time. And I think Shopify does tend to do most of the ones for you, but it's worth checking.
Shopify has it built in, so when you upload it's compressing it. Squarespace doesn't. That's one to bear in mind. So if you drag a massive image into Squarespace will just take it on. I think it might compress it, but it doesn't resize it. So if you load in a 4,000 pixel wide JPEG and put it in a 200 pixel box, it's still loading the big box, but I think it does the compression, because like you can't, and it just doesn't let you drag in big files to start with. But either way, the point being that if you go to GT Metrics, it will tell you which images are wrong.
Yeah.
It just says, this image, it's here, just fix it. So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to go through your website and work it out. GT Metrics can tell you, just give you a long list of files that you need to attend to. The other thing I wanted to say is that a lot of these other tools spit out some absolute developer garbage. So it will say, like your CDN caching optimization isn't good. And to most people, that's like, And to be honest, some of the stuff they get to, especially on Google, when it gets to like the 80-90%, the stuff they're talking about is like internet backbone level stuff. So unless you're willing to buy a whole data center and run the server yourself, it just hits a point where you can't make it any better. So we have had in the past client issues where they've come back and they're saying, it's still throwing an error. And it's like, well, yeah, if you want to fix that, you need to buy a data center and your own backbone connection, and then we can fix it. So we use SiteGround a lot for our hosting, and they're famously one of the fastest hosts on the internet. and they will still get, like, it's down to about 90. You just can't get it past that with them, because the speed that their hypervisor reacts is still too slow for Google. But you can't change that. It's not something you can change, and when you look at it, you're talking thousandths of a second.
I'm pretty sure that I've put in like some of Google's own websites as well, like their support documentation or their kind of marketing sites, and even they come back with quite a few errors and say that they're not fast enough. So with the Lighthouse, I wouldn't always take it with a bucket of salt, because it is just it's a perfect world scenario rather than a practical scenario. Whereas I think GT Metrics is far more reasonable in kind of showing like, well, these ones you could fix, but you're probably better off just focusing on making sure your images are the right size and that they don't all load at once. Yeah. And that's normally a fairly simple thing to fix with WordPress plugins or with your developer, or
or just looking at the image and re-uploading it, because you download the one that's a problem, go to your website and just re-upload the one they gave you that's fixed.
Yeah.
So it might take half an hour, but that'll get you from an E to an A, just fixing images. And then the rest of it you can leave.
Yeah.
Because as long as it's under 3 seconds and you're scoring an A, doesn't really matter the rest of it. Like, if you really want to, you could spend time and effort on it, but it's not going to help your SEO. It's not going to reduce your Google Ads bill.
No.
It's not going to. It's not going to help you in any way other than the feel-good factor of seeing some more green dots rather than some and less red ones.
Agreed. I think that ties it up quite nicely, really.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add on speed?
I don't think so, really. I think going back to the SEO thing you mentioned just then, was that normally if you're at a point where your site is good enough, then there'll be other things from an SEO point of view that will have more impact. The speed is a very small kind of consideration there. So, there's no point having a website that loads instantly if there's no keywords on it and there's no content on it that people are actually looking for.
Yes.
So there really is a kind of a balancing act to be practical, be realistic, and just focus on the user. Keep them in mind when you're building website pages, and you won't go far wrong. I think in most times, if you are putting massive images in there, just think about maybe someone on mobile trying to load that with a limited data connection. It doesn't have a good time, so don't do it. You won't go far wrong. So I think, don't worry too much about page speed. Hit the obvious options, and then focus on improving your user experience somewhere else, and then you'll probably be okay. And don't buy into the fear too much.
Exactly. Excellent. Okay, well, you can find this video podcast now on Spotify and on iTunes and all good podcast outlets, as well as to our long-serving fans on YouTube. So yes, if you've got any suggestions for other topics you'd like us to cover, either drop a comment on the bottom of this, or you can get in touch with us on LinkedIn. Again, the links will be on the show notes, as they always are. We're also going to put the links to GT Metrics and to some of the compression tools we spoke about in this episode in the show notes, so do check them out there. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Bye.